I've been in this business for 18 years, and I've heard a lot of talk about chambers of commerce remaining relevant. And I'd like to share some thoughts with you today based upon what we've observed when we work with chambers of commerce. And the first idea that I'd like to share is that if you want to be relevant, do relevant things. That's the first thing. But the second idea would be, I've yet to hear somebody say that being relevant is the vision that they have for themselves or for their chamber. Because quite frankly, being relevant is not compelling. Having an impact for your members and for your community, now that's compelling. But it takes more than just setting that vision for yourself. It takes some specific steps in order for you to make that transformation from relevance to impact. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, let me start with just a simple image. A lamppost and a lighthouse. For many years, chambers of commerce have functioned like lampposts. They're steady, familiar, literally a fixture of the community and a reassuring presence in the middle of town. They're visible, yes, but they're mostly just illuminating what's already been built. The lamppost in this example symbolizes relevance. And for a long time in our profession, relevance was enough. But today, employers and communities are navigating bigger, more dangerous waters. Economic volatility, workforce gaps, social fragmentation, AI technology that may well be the next digital revolution. And if we are to believe the arguments of billionaire Ray Dalio, who is the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, we may even be looking at a changing world order. So what employers and communities need right now isn't another lamppost. What they need now is a lighthouse, something bold, something elevated, something that's unmistakably focused on lighting the way forward for others. And that's the shift from being a chamber that is present to being a chamber that is directional. From the chamber being described as a fixture of the community to the organization that lights the way for others. From striving to remain relevant to making an impact. There's a real cost to clinging to that lamppost model. The most visionary business leaders in your communities will always drift towards groups that offer more clarity and traction. Public institutions have a long track record of filling the vacuum with more bureaucracy instead of momentum. And the Chamber of Commerce, once a driver of progress in the community, now becomes a background actor in its own community. So let's be clear. Efforts to remain relevant seem more like survival than leadership. But making an impact, that takes leadership. So I want you to ask yourself, is your chamber a fixture that mostly just lights up the sidewalk? Or are you lighting the way for your community to help them navigate the horizon? If you want your Chamber of Commerce to be relevant, yes, that takes an intentional commitment. But if you want your chamber to truly impact your community, that requires a higher level of leadership. And it requires 4 specific intentional steps that we'll talk about later. But first, let me explain, starting with some context, because I'm an old timer in this business. About 15 years ago, when technology became a mainstream tool for professional networking, chambers across the country began to feel pressured and uncertain. In preceding years, some of their traditional strengths were eroded by splinter groups such as local economic development organizations, convention and visitors bureaus, and Main Street merchant associations. And now here comes technology, threatening to throw sand in the gears of a core chamber competency that we know as networking. This eventually led to the publication of the Horizon Initiative in 2015 by the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives, otherwise known as ACCE. The Horizon Initiative is a groundbreaking look 10 years into the future, which boldly predicted 8 influences that would shape the future of chambers and how they could adapt. And even from the first paragraph in that initiative, in that report, it asked the hard question: how will chambers of commerce adapt and evolve over the next decade and ensure that their best days are still ahead of them? It was a conversation starter then, and it still is. So here we are, 10 years after the Horizon Initiative in 2025. And let me ask you, is your Chamber of Commerce relevant in your community? Well, if not, you have some work to do, but the challenge is not insurmountable. And yet, even if you've achieved relevance, I've seen enough chambers in nearly 2 decades in this business to tell you that here's your dilemma. Relevance is only the halfway point between pressing forward and making an impact or falling backward into irrelevance. Relevance is only a milestone that means you're still part of the conversation. But many of your members and your community, they expect more. They expect the chamber to illuminate the challenges ahead and to drive the conversation. They expect leadership. They expect impact. And some of you might think that, hey, you know, Matt, we're not ready for that yet. We've got a couple of good years before we can get, to our relevant position now to making an impact. Fair enough. You know your chamber better than I do. But I just want to remind you of this. If that's where you're at with your chamber now, then you're also a couple of bad years away from falling back into irrelevance. So before I go any further, would you say you agree or disagree with some of the things? And that's fine if you disagree. Like who generally agrees, generally speaking, right? Okay. Who generally disagrees? That's fine. Okay. Now, would you like to see some of the things that SACA has been working on to help local chambers make this transformation from lamppost to lighthouse, right? Of course. Yeah, hoo-wah. The first thing that we need to do is actually show you what's keeping you stuck. And during my 18 years in the chamber world, 12 of them leading SACA, supporting 129 chambers of commerce, I've seen 4 persistent challenges drag chambers down. I've talked about the 4 critical challenges quite a bit for some time now, and I've refined my thinking over time so they can be placed in a context that helps chambers transform from relevant to impact. And broadly speaking, starting in the upper left-hand corner, broadly speaking, chambers are challenged by the pace of technology, the lack of industry standard metrics, factors leading to complacency, and getting the right leadership. And again, in broad terms, the technology and the industry metric challenges affect all chambers nationwide. And complacency and leadership challenges only affect some chambers because many chambers have already solved those problems. But let's get a little more specific. Here's what's keeping you stuck. So again, starting on the left-hand, upper left-hand side, and we'll work our way clockwise. The first thing is outdated technology infrastructure. Again, I've been in this business a long time, and there was a time when local chambers could operate on spreadsheets. Well, that time has long passed, right? Chambers must now operate with a real tech stack, integrated data, protected by cybersecurity protection. And anything less signals to your members that your organization is not ready for today's world. The second thing is that there are no industry-wide metrics, and therefore nobody knows the truth. Aside from the ACCE Annual Operations Survey, there are no standard metrics within this industry, and chambers often have no idea whether they are performing well or if they're falling behind. After more than a decade of working in SACA, specifically with chambers of commerce, I am convinced that the lack of industry standard metrics is the leading factor that creates ambiguity about who the chamber is and what it should be doing in your community. The fact that no one knows the truth sets the chamber up to start trying just about anything to remain relevant. Which leads us to moving down to the next one. It sets you up for mission drift. B.J. Weiberg, who formerly led the Chamber Professionals of Ohio, used to say that the local Chamber of Commerce must resist well-meaning people who want to turn the chamber into the Chamber of Community, the Chamber of Civics, or the Chamber of Charity. And when you start doing those things, you disconnect from being a Chamber of Commerce, from a chamber that has a clear identity, and you gradually start to lose focus. And you start settling into what I call the calm sea of complacency, where nothing's going really bad, but you're not making an impact either. Just kind of middling around in there, and things are okay. But what you're not doing is you're not navigating the way for others and being a lighthouse, nor are you speaking as the voice of business in your community. And of course, what that eventually leads to is ineffective leadership. It's just a consequence of doing those things. But I would also add that, many local chambers, and I get it, I understand that you have limited resources, but many local chambers settle for part-time directors or volunteers, and in my opinion, without empowered full-time leadership, it's very, very difficult to have any sort of sustained impact in your community. So how do we get from challenges to changes? Well, here are 4 strategic shifts that your chamber must make in order to get from relevant to impact. Number 1, use technology to modernize, standardize, and optimize. Secondly, let the truth light the way through standard industry metrics. Understand and accept that impact makes waves, and that's a hard one for us to do sometimes, and I'll talk about that a little later in more detail. And then finally, practice catalytic leadership. We need to be the catalysts. So here are some examples. Being a modern chamber means behaving more like a modern business these days. So you need to be using a CRM, you need to have a database, or at least have access to one. As we've seen today, you need to embrace AI tools of all kinds now. And we offer a tool for member prospecting called Win4 Marketing, where chambers that do not have a reliable database can plug into ours, and we can help you prospect for members. In his book, Principles, again, billionaire Ray Dalio pointed out that truth is the essential foundation for any good outcome. And the truth is, no one knows the truth regarding what good or bad performance looks like for chambers of commerce due to a lack of clear data. And the only way that we can get to the truth is for all of us here to be involved in the collective benchmarking efforts that we're trying to put forth. We can't fix what we can't measure. So we need to let the truth guide our path forward. And what I'm asking you to do is use our tools that are in your chamber portal. Use the performance scorecard, which I'm going to show here a little bit later on. But use the forecasting tools as well so that you can get an accurate picture of your growth. Thirdly, you need to recognize that, hey, making an impact also entails making waves. And yes, for a lot of us, that means discomfort. But you don't have to be a showboat. You don't have to pick fights with people. On the other hand, you can't avoid the hard conversations or hide from leadership challenges that exist in your community or in your industry. If you want your chamber to lead and not just survive, the time to move from relevance to impact is now. And that's why it's critical for you to define your identity and to stick to it. You need to avoid drifting into civics and charity by focusing on business advocacy, workforce and economic development, your organizational strength, or even starting a chamber foundation. The Horizon Report urged chambers of commerce to be catalytic leaders. We need to be catalysts in our communities. And it challenged all of us to focus less upon what our chamber actually does and more about who we are. Boards should hire for vision and not just execution. Boards should also hire full-time professionals capable of leading change and giving them the resources to grow themselves and others. As our friend Dave Atkinson, formerly of the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, wrote in Horseshoes versus Chess, chambers should be led by leaders, not just caretakers who act as placeholders. Ideally, these leaders not only contribute to their communities, but also to the next generation of chamber leaders. So here's the essence of what I'm trying to convey in this portion. There's a gentleman by the name of James Carse. He wrote a book called Finite versus Infinite Games. And he described finite games as the goal of a finite game is simply to declare a winner at the end of the game. Infinite games are quite different, where the goal of the game is simply to be able to keep playing the game. And I would submit to you that as chambers of commerce and leaders in your community, that you're in this constant infinite game. There's not going to be, a buzzer that goes off tomorrow where you can say, hey, did we win or did we lose, right? You guys just keep hammering away at the things that you're working on, and really the only thing that you can measure yourself by is how well equipped or how capable you are of continuing in the game. That's all we can really do right now, is to measure the chamber's capacity or readiness to continue competing. So let me ask you two quick questions. You don't have to answer out loud, right? Where would you currently rate your chamber on this spectrum here? Irrelevant, relevant, or impactful, or somewhere in between? Again, you don't have to blurt this out. But I just want you in your own mind to find out where you think you are. And then the second question is, what steps does your chamber need to take to get to the next milestone? So just kind of think about that for a minute. However you measured yourself on that scale, We want to help chambers of commerce increase their capacity and their readiness by helping them plan better and to make better decisions. And we decided a couple of years ago at SACA that we needed to evolve in a manner that creates value for chambers in different ways. And rather than duplicating the training efforts of the Chamber Professionals of Ohio, we chose to be one of their primary funders, while we developed tools for chambers of commerce that did not exist anywhere else in the industry. And I'm excited to demonstrate some of those tools today. In fact, we're going to be giving you a glimpse into a prototype chamber performance scorecard. The scorecard gives local chambers of commerce a look at a snapshot of their performance by comparing them to other SACA chambers. And it's a tool that is totally unique to our profession. But why did we do this? Well, it's because as a whole, our industry suffers from the myth that, if you've seen one chamber of commerce, you've seen one. And this harmful myth has prevented our profession from establishing industry standard metrics. And the truth is that all chambers of commerce, regardless of your size or your location, can be measured on the same key data points that provide a snapshot of organizational performance. So we're going to get into that right now. We've been working on this idea for a performance scorecard. We actually conceived it probably 2.5 or 3 years ago. And it's really neat to see something that you kind of conceived in your mind sort of coming to fruition. We've got the Springboro Chamber listed on here, but these are not actual numbers, right? This is just, we wanted to give you an example of what this would look like. But right now in the initial prototype, it's an 8-page document, starts with this cover page, and then it goes to a table of contents, and then we'll get to the heart of it. So the Chamber Performance Scorecard measures 7 key data points across 3 broad categories. And those 3 broad categories are membership growth, financial strength, and revenue composition. And what the scorecard does is it will provide a percentile ranking against other chambers. It can also be, we're designing it so that it can be updated as often as you would like. So you can go in and put in new data for your chamber, and then the following day, you will have a new scorecard available for you that ranks you against other chambers. But what we also wanted to do with it, in addition to the percentile ranking, is give you like a broad rating of you're either underperforming, performing, or overperforming. So in future versions of this card, even though this is the prototype, we wanted to give you more comparisons against more chambers. This one here at the bottom, first of all, it starts out with an overall rank. So in this case, we have a overperforming chamber that is performing at approximately 69% of capacity compared to other chambers in that percentile. But the 7 key data points in the 3 broad categories. So for membership growth, those data points are your market penetration rate, your member retention rate, and the number of new members recruited. For financial strength, the 3 data points that are measured are revenue per member, expense per member, and months of cash. And then revenue composition is essentially its own number, where we want to measure the percentage of dues revenue versus non-dues revenue. I do want to comment briefly about market penetration rate. If you were at the winter conference for the Chamber of Professionals of Ohio, you heard me deliver a presentation about many chambers that are, because of the way that you've named yourselves, you're landlocked, right? Like the Preble County Chamber is essentially only marketing to Preble County. And so therefore, your market penetration rate becomes, in my opinion, probably the most important number that you can know, right? As I've said before, It's not like you're out there selling Amazon Prime memberships to the entire world. You're selling chamber memberships to a restricted area. And so that market penetration rate becomes a very, very important number for you to know. But this is what the scorecard will look like on, I think it's page 3. It'll give you a snapshot of all your different scorings on these different data points. Here's how it would look for the revenue composition as well. And then what we do is we drill down even further and give you a couple of pages where we not only give you this, show you where you are on the dial, but have a little explanation on what that actually means according to, how we're sort of evaluating the data right now. And obviously that's something that we will be able to refine over time, but we're really excited about being able to show this to you and to give you something to compare yourselves and your performance against your peers. And then we drill down even further, and we have some key takeaways for each one of these categories that hopefully you can take this information, show it to your board, and maybe develop a plan of action for improving or continuing good performance. Finally, on the last page here, this part about revenue composition, this table here is data that we took from the ACCE operations survey. And so you'll see here that according to budget size, this is what the dues revenue versus non-dues revenue percentages are from those respondents. So this is a good table to show your board saying, hey, this is where we should be, or at least according to chambers who have responded to this survey.
Hello, everyone. If you attended the SACA annual meeting last week, at the end of the presentation, I was going to do a demo of our online portal, and we had some internet problems. So what I wanted to do is record the demo for you, and then that way you can get this information not only into your hands, but into the hands of your board to see if it's something that you want to participate in. I certainly encourage you to do that. So what I've done here is I've logged in as a particular chamber. We're not going to say which chamber. And immediately you'll see at the bottom here that your chamber will be compared against 4 other chambers. Right now, those 4 chambers are all chambers who are serving on our board of directors. But the first thing that I want to show you here is for your market area. And what this will do is, in order to get this set up, we asked chambers of commerce to give us their 3 primary zip codes that they operate in. And if you were a countywide chamber, we asked you to give us 6 primary zip codes. And from that, we started to collect data. Part of that data that we collected was actually your membership list. And then we're going to show you what we did with it just on one of the things that we've done with that from this graph. So let's start with this particular chamber here. You'll see in the primary zip codes that they gave to us that there's just under 3,500 businesses within those 3 primary zip codes. Then if you move to the red bar and hover over it, you'll see that they've got 677 members within those 3 zip codes, the primary zip codes. And then in the gold bar, how many of those employers are enrolled in a SACA program? So this gives you a good idea just of what your overall market area is. The next graph begins to show us some of the participation rates in different SACA programs. Now this shows a graph of all of our programs and what the participation is in this particular chamber. It's also represented in a 3D graph shown in this manner that you can print this out and show to your board. But what I really want to show you out of this this data set, is really your market penetration rate. And before I dig into the numbers, if you saw me present at the Chamber of Professionals of Ohio, I did a presentation on essentially chambers that are landlocked, and how important market penetration rate is for those chambers who have defined their market area, let's just say as the, I'm recording this down in the over the Rhine area. So if you're the OTR chamber, you're sort of landlocked into that area. And therefore, market penetration rate becomes a very, very important number for you to know. And this particular part of the analytics shows you that. It shows you that out of this chamber that we're talking about, that they have 19% market penetration rate within their 3 primary zip codes, and they've got about 3% participation rate in SACA programs in that. This is another representation that we wanted to show you of different participation in SACA programs, that out of this chamber, it shows you that 83, almost 84% of their members are not enrolled in any kind of SACA program. But those who are enrolled, it shows you what the breakdown of that is. And this ring representation is very telling. It's like, look, you want to pick up more stickiness for renewals, maybe even some more non-dues revenue, then this is a good way for you to increase your enrollment in the SACA programs. The next tool that we wanted to show you is something that we called Member Forecast. And Member Forecast is a fairly simple idea, but I don't think chambers have an appreciation for just how hard it is to grow membership over the course of time. So we drew up a tool for you. We produced a tool. And basically it's like this. You take 3 data points. You take the starting number of members that you have, your desired retention rate, and your desired number of new members per year. And so you'll see in this fictitious chamber that we're showing right here that we're starting with 500 members with a desired retention rate of 90% and a desired number of new members of 105 new members every year. Under those assumptions, this is what your growth curve is going to look like for the next 20 years. And so remember that starting with 500, 90% retention, 105 new members per year, after 20 years, we still didn't even double the number of members. We didn't go from 500 to 1,000. We actually ended at 975, actually 976 if you round it up. Now, we also represented this for you in a table that you can download here into a PDF. And the cool thing about this, we'll go ahead and download it. The cool thing about this is that you can create different scenarios that you can present to your board. So you can say, well, under this scenario, we had 90% retention and 105 new members. And under this other scenario, we had 92% retention and 100 members. And let's just go ahead and dig in that number, that second set of assumptions, and see what the results are. So if I go here and I punch in 92% and reduce the number of new members per year from 105 to actually 100, you'll see that the difference is pretty significant. In this case, you actually would double your membership over time. So one of the points we're trying to make here out of this is that new member recruitment is very important, but where you're really going to experience your growth is through member retention. And we wanted to build a tool for you that would not only show you that graphically, but also give you a table to download that. So here's the primary reason that we built a tool like Member Forecast. I know what it's like to be in your shoes. I know what it's like to have a board who will say to you, there's no reason why we can't double our membership in the next 2 or 3 years. And then they leave the boardroom and go on their daily business, and they just sort of like leave it up to you to make that happen. The numbers tell you a different story, right? The numbers tell you that, again, if you started out with 500 members and you had 90% retention, which is very good. Anything that begins with a 9 is good. And you had 105 new members per year, even at the end of 20 years. If you do the math, it's going to tell you that you still won't double your membership at the end of 20 years, even with those very good numbers. So what is it that you need to focus on? Well, you can't just throw everything out. Well, let's just figure out the most important thing to work on. And if we change this 90% retention, if we just bump it up 2%, it can have an enormous effect on the number of members we have over the course of time. So that's what we're trying to show you here, is that you just can't go out there and recruit a bunch of new members and expect to double membership. But the fact is, it's actually quite the opposite. You really need to retain what you have now and then build upon that. I do want to mention that by the end of this year, we're going to have another tool that's very similar to this. It's going to be called Growth Forecast. It'll take these same 3 data points, but it will also add, you'll be able to input what your desired growth rate is of your membership. So let's just say you plug in 6%, and then you plug in your number of members that you have now and a desired retention rate. It will automatically populate for you how many new members that you need to achieve, that you need to recruit in order to achieve that desired growth rate. Conversely, if you leave out the member retention and you populate the number of new members recruited, it will populate for you the member retention rate that you need to achieve in order to achieve your growth rate. So as I mentioned to you at the SACA annual meeting, we're not trying to duplicate the training efforts of the Chamber of Professionals of Ohio. What we would prefer to do is actually build tools for you that you can use in your planning. And we believe that we've done that for you.
The final thing, as you're doing this, again, we're here to help you not only become relevant, but to get you from being relevant, being a lamppost, to being a lighthouse. So if you have any questions of us, please let us know. We're more than happy to help get you there. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
This is an intellectual property question. Did you copyright the lamppost versus lighthouse, or can we steal that for board meetings?
Even if I did copyright it, you could use it. Right?
Okay, I have that on record.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
So I think we've learned in the chamber industry, Jeff, that R&D stands for rip off and duplicate. So we're more than happy to help you out there.
How can we help you with our data? What's the best way to make certain that we're getting accurate data from all the chambers to allow you to produce reports? You can say, yes, this is a comparison of 1 to 350. I know we're not getting everybody, but in that process. So what can we do to help you process that? And more importantly, Mickey.
Yeah, and more importantly, Mickey, right? I just think that staying engaged is the most important thing. Like when we ask for these things, we're not trying to impose upon you. But I do think, as I've mentioned in this whole presentation, that I really do think it's incumbent upon us to start collecting this data and comparing ourselves to each other, just so we can find out where the truth actually lies, right? So what I would ask then is just for your commitment, to engage and to send us accurate data. Right now, we're only asking for 7 key data points, and then we're getting some of the other information from GuideStar. We have a question here.
Hey, Matt. This is Nikki over here. One thing that we really would like from you, thank you, Brian, for bringing it up, membership list. Yeah. We would love it if you could send us your membership list, and that would really help with the benchmarking also. And just so you know, we are not using your membership list to go after your members and market to them. We want your list so that we don't market to them. We want to market to potential members. So anyway, some of you have been reluctant about that, so I just wanted to chime in.
Yeah, that's an important point, and I'll restate that. For anyone who's new out here, right, we would like your membership lists, as Mickey said, not to market to your members, but so that we can exclude them from marketing with the database that we already have within the zip codes that you operate in. So that certainly helps us narrow down marketing to those non-members, trying to get them to become chamber members in your communities.
Hello. So this was fantastic, very insightful. We're having some leadership changes and growth at our chamber, so that's a good thing. Is this something that a member of your team can come and walk our board through this? Because I don't think I can be as effective in parlaying what you did to us today.
I would be more than happy to walk your board through all of this, and that's an open invitation to everybody. Like if you would want me to present the same information to your board and even go into even more detail, I would be more than happy to do that.
In relation to the scorecard, which I think we're both excited for that to launch and to just kind of see where we land, is that something that as more people begin to fill out the scorecard, do those metrics become maybe more accurate, or just with a larger data point base, does that give us a little bit more insight into where we're at, and how would that improve the scorecard?
You just answered your own question. The answer is yes. I mean, the more data that we have, the more that, as I say, the more that we can arrive at the truth, right? To find out where your chamber measures up against other chambers within these data points. So yes, that's why we need your engagement on this. The more data we have, I think the better it gets.
So with great anticipation about the rollout, what do you envision that being? Will that be a virtual meeting? Would we come together? Do you have any details or ideas of what that might look like?
I would assume, since we only get together, SACA, once a year, it will probably be a series of Zoom calls, in order to there's probably going to be an initial rollout and then a follow-up. So I would imagine that we would do, probably 2 or 3 of each of those.
Just a comment, Matt. You and I have talked about the importance of data over the years and how much it means to the Chamber of Commerce. And this is something I think that particular chambers across our state has overlooked a lot. So I'm glad that you're emphasizing it today. So on Chamber Day, on June 4th, we'll cover data as well, but it'll be coming from a different perspective. This perspective of when you are out meeting with your members and collecting information, how important it is for you to take that data, plug it into your CRM so that you have it. Even if it's meeting with them, learning more about your business, not just more about like how many employees they've got, how much money they're giving you a year, but more in depth about what they do. And then you can always get the information from SACA about if they're participating in one of their programs. But I think it's important for you to come back, and you always have a space somewhere, whether it's Growth Zone, whatever you use, Chamber Nation, and plugging that data in after you meet with that chamber member. And then set those meetings up with those chamber members throughout the year to collect that data. This is data that's very important for you so that you know who your members are. And that way, when you meet with them again, you can update that data. Last time we talked about this. That's important as well. That's a different type of data, but still highly important for renewal membership and relation membership, and to know what your business is and their growth is. I think this does pertain to a little bit what you're talking about today, Matt.
Oh, I absolutely agree. When you're having those meetings, additionally, you need, I'm sure hopefully you're talking about what their pain points are. You need to capture that information and maintain it. Not only because you know that about that member or about that employer, but then, what happens if you have staff turnover right? And you don't have that information in your notes, and then you send the new person out there and they're just having the meeting that they had a year ago with that member. And quite frankly, that member's not going to like that very much. So if you have that information available and knowing what their pain point is or are, what the pain points are, that's extremely valuable information, not only to collect, but also to record. Okay. Thank you for your time, everybody. Thanks for coming out today. Appreciate it.